Okay.
All right, sweet. So, Micah, I saw Lockdown, and I was really shocked at how this all came about. I was reading your little tidbit at the end of the movie, and this takes dedication, what you did, and overall, I really enjoyed the movie.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It was difficult to make during a pandemic, obviously, but also I can honestly say that I've made several movies in the last few years. All of the other ones were much larger than Lockdown, and I have not had that much fun making a movie in a long time. So Lockdown did something for all of us that were on set that was really special during that time of filming, that really it got us through a really tough time in life. And so it will always hold a special place in my heart because of that.
Yeah, and I like the fact that even though you had a minimal crew and all that, a lot of them doubled as some of the actors in the film, including you. I caught you in the movie at one point. So
yeah,
I was like, was that the director? Like, oh, that's the director right there. He just got but that was pretty cool.
Well, it's so funny you say that, because someone asked me, so Lockdown has already won Best Action Film of the Year at the Austin Action Fest. And then we also won the Best Texas Film of the Year at another festival called the Real East Texas Film Festival. And so that's where it premiered, is at the Real East Texas Film Festival, which, by the way, anybody listening, if you have a film, the Real East Texas Film Festival is a great festival to go to. It's in Kilgore, Texas. But anyway, someone in, I can't remember, it was some crew member came up to me that wasn't working that day during the scene that I was in, just, for 30 seconds, and who was behind the camera that day? And I said, well, it was no one. It was on a tripod. We shot the whole thing on that little quick scene on a tripod and moved it around. And they were like, unbelievable, man. So that just gives you an idea of how much we had to really work together and kind of make this thing happen.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed was you didn't really have a script going into it. It's like you just went in and went for it. So how did the idea come about for the film?
Well, I will be completely honest, and I'm going to throw some of my actors under the bus here, which they would laugh at. They would love that. But basically what happened is I wanted to do something purely experimental at first. And I thought, if Will Ferrell and his friends can get away with improvising their way through a whole movie, why can't we? And so when we started filming, we had basically like a bullet point outline of how the story would flow from beginning to end, but no actual scripted dialogue. And we shot for 3 straight days, all day, 12-hour days, 3 days. And at the end of the third day, I was like, guys, this is a dumpster fire. This is not good. And so I said, everybody, I love you, but we're never showing this to anyone ever, ever. And everybody take 3 days off, and I'm going to go write Act 1. And so everybody took 3 days off, and I went and I wrote about 30 pages in that first 3 days. And we got back together. They learned the lines like on the spot, and we shot the first act of the movie. Then we took another 3 days off, and I wrote Act 2, and they came back and we shot Act 2. And so after Act 2, it got a little bit like shooting and writing at the same time. And a lot of actors were giving their input. Well, what if he says this, or what if he does that? And so I was like, oh yeah, that's great. We kind of, it started to get very collaborative, but we did end up with a full script eventually. But when we started filming, there was nothing. And so it was just an idea. It was a concept, really. And that was it. We ran with it, and we never gave up, and it turned into a real movie.
That's awesome. And the big surprise for me was Kevin Nash being in the film, because I'm a huge fan of wrestling. And what was it like to have him in the film? It must have been mind blowing.
Oh, it was awesome, man. I grew up in the days of NWO and all that kind of stuff, and I've always loved Kevin Nash, his persona as a wrestler, and just his coolness. I mean, like, just cool oozes from Kevin Nash from every pore in his body, like he can just stand there and not talk, and you're just like, wow, that dude's cool.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that makes any film role work. I mean, it doesn't matter what he does, without a doubt.
Right.
Like, look at him in The Punisher, where he was the Russian. Like, he gave Tom Jane a run for his money. Dead or Alive, he was Bass Armstrong. He even provided some of the comic relief in that movie. I mean, he just had I feel like he's one of those. He's one of those actors who are truly underrated, and he needs more. He needs more appreciation.
I couldn't agree more. And I will add to that too, is that he's also a great human being. I had the pleasure of picking Kevin up at the airport in Dallas, and we shot, this was shot in Texas, and we shot about 2.5 hours east of Dallas in a very small town called Marshall, Texas, and a little town nearby called New Diana, Texas. And so we had about 2.5 hours to get to know each other on the drive in from the airport in Dallas. And we laughed, we talked about, wrestling and about the business, about Hollywood. It was like two old college buddies. And, here he is, this Hall of Fame wrestler, this famous actor, this guy that, you think like just all the things that you would think, right? Like, wow, and we're getting along like he's an old college buddy. And I'm supposed to be taking, top class care of him, first class care of him. I'm taking him to the best hotel in town. And I've got to make sure he's got everything he needs. And it's what you do when you work with stars, right?
Yeah.
And we roll into town, and I'm like, hey man, where can I take you to, get anything you want? Where can I take you to dinner? And his response is, hey, let me buy you dinner. And I'm like, no, you're not supposed to do that. And he's like, no, like this has been really fun. He's like, I love being a part of this movie. I want to take you out. And so here we are, we end up at the Outback Steakhouse, and he buys me dinner. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be buying you dinner, man. So I can't say enough about how great of a guy he was and how much fun he is to work with. He's tough, and he knows what he wants, and he has strong opinions like any other, professional actor or athlete or whatever. But man, he was a joy to work with. Lots of fun.
That's awesome. And I liked the one character I kind of like, even though he was a bit over the top at times, was Suede's character as Kevin's.
I lost you there for a second. I can't hear you.
All right, how about better?
Hey.
Okay, all right.
Better. There you are.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, signal's crazy here sometimes, so it's fine. But what I really liked was Suede's character as Kevin's son, because he's the type who wanted to prove himself, but yeah, you could see that he's a loose cannon, and he works quite well as the bad guy. He had the film reminded me of an 80s action film set in the future, but what I liked was that it's not like the futuristic action film where it takes technological advances. It's just like, it's pretty much, and I think that's why I kind of like the film, because for a while we see future action films, you're expecting robots or, stuff like that. Like you don't get that homely feel like you do. I did with this, and that's why I like this one really. Like his character was like, remind me of the 80s quintessential villain, where he has to have like lines and the over the top performance. I really like that about the film in his role.
Well, thank you. Suede is a good personal friend of mine. I think he's been in something like 5 of my movies now. We work together a lot, and this is my favorite thing I've ever seen Suede put on film. I really, really like his performance in this movie. I think I love your comparison to an 80s action movie. I grew up on 80s and 90s action movies.
So did I.
I love 80s and 90s action movies. And so that's a huge compliment to me. And I think Suede fits very much. If you love those old kind of movies, Suede fits perfectly into that vein of the villain who is really a little off his rocker, and has something big to prove. And he has these crazy outbursts, and he's creepy in that way,
Yeah.
And so I have bragged on Suede to everybody who will listen, because I really do think he just nailed that performance for this particular genre and this type of film. And you mentioned, like, even though it's set in the future, slightly in the future, you think about, like, what did we think, the 2000s were going to be like back in the 80s and 90s? Well, we thought they were going to be high tech, like the Jetsons. And then you get to 2000 and, it's more high tech than the 80s, but like, the cars look a little newer and the phones look a little smaller, but like, it looks
nothing else really changed. Yeah. So it's,
right.
And that's why I felt like this really works, because that's like, we're going to expect this in 2030, like not so much the population decimating, but just the feel of things, just the feel of things. Like it's nothing, it's not gonna be that much of a change, I don't think. So, that's why it worked. That's why I felt it worked more.
Yeah, and like the same fashions come and go and come, and like what was popular in the 60s or the 70s goes away, and then it comes back 30 years later. And it's like I think about the jacket that Suede wears, the blue jean jacket, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the wool collar on it. And it's like, that looks like something from 30 years ago, but that is now, popular again.
Yeah,
And
a
so
friend of mine,
all-
a friend of mine said denim is like the color of villains. So that's perfectly fit.
Awesome. And the school that, another cool thing about this movie is that the high school that it's filmed in mostly is actually where my own mom went to high school. And
wow.
that school was built in like 1920, right? And now we are filming, like 100 years later.
Yeah.
It's being used for a film that's set in the future.
Yeah,
So,
cool.
I love that about it. So I'm glad you picked up on that, because that's one of the things I thought was cool, is like, it's not, because we thought like, okay, do we do the whole like apocalyptic landscape and everything's orange? And I was like, no, like, I think that's a dream world of what the future is, even in an apocalypse. I think the real world is more real than that, so that's cool that you picked up on that.
And I hope people who do see the film will also get that as well, because they're like, oh, where's the high tech stuff? Like, we said this about, look at Transformers, it was supposed to be set in 2005, and look what happened to us in 2005, really nothing. So basically just leave it as it is. And I like David's role as Hap.
Yeah,
he was like the 80s, he was like the 80s, 90s action hero, like B-movie action hero, like ex-military. But I like the fact that he was flawed, and the fact that he was estranged from his sister. And not until the very end we get an understanding why they were estranged. And I really think that as of late, I've been seeing films where we have these flawed action heroes, and I think it really works because it brings a sense of realism into the film. So great job on that as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's good when they're not just, I'm not a big fan of the robot action hero where he's perfect, he's whatever, and he's a butt kicking machine, right?
Yeah.
And that's all they are. And it can be cool, but it also can get boring too if there's no human element to it. And in fact, there's a line in this movie where kind of earlier on, where they're in the locker room, and she asked him what happened to mom and dad.
Right.
And he doesn't answer her. He just looks at her, and there's this long moment where they stare at each other, and he's not ready to tell her what happened to their parents. And then suddenly the bad guys rush in and they have to hide. And so he doesn't get a chance to say anything. But in the script, he did allude to what happened to mom and dad, and he didn't outright say it, but he started to go down that path. And when we were in the edit, I said, let's cut that. Let's leave it to, let's leave more suspense there. Let the audience really wonder, and let him not say it. And then the bad guys come in. So we cut a line there that would start to allude to it, so we could save it for later in the film. And I think that worked well.
I think so too. I like that, because I just recently saw a movie where someone had to tell someone who they really were. Like, I have something to tell you, and they kept getting interrupted until finally midway through the film, she finally tells them who she really is. So I'm like, it kept going, like, you need to tell me, when are you going to tell this guy who you are? Like, it gives that anticipation level, and then finally, it's all revealed. It's like, okay, big sigh of relief, but still, like, you feel for that character, and that's how I felt with this one.
Yeah, and I last thing I want to do is ever give away too much, but with their own personal story, brother and sister, and what happened with their family, and why they are the way they are, and how they ended up in their different paths in life. There's some ambiguity. There's like, who is really the good guy? Who is really the bad guy? Who is, because so often in life we judge a book by its cover, and that's not what is really always the truth. And so you kind of find out, different things about them. I'm trying not to say too much here, but you may or may not find out different things about them throughout the film that may paint them differently than maybe you saw them originally in the film. Exactly. And so that's a really fun part of it, not just being an action thriller, but also having some human elements to it that feel like things that you can relate to. And everybody has family issues. You know, everybody has an estranged sibling or cousin or mother or father or aunt or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's universally relatable. And the other thing is that the thing that I hope people get from this movie on a human level more than anything else is I really want people to understand what the movie is trying to say, which a lot of times action movies aren't necessarily trying to say anything other than like, entertainment,
just blow
and
up
fun.
stuff, just blow them up.
And I think that is those are the bookends of this movie, right? Like that's what we like. People are going to watch it because they want to see, fight scenes. They want to see crashes and explosions, and it's got all that stuff in it. And that's the most fun parts to film, but what I hope people walk away with is the message that all of us have this intrinsic value, that we're all born valuable, and it doesn't matter where you end up in life. It doesn't matter, if you look good on the inside, if you have living in a dilapidated building, homeless and addicted to drugs, it doesn't matter. You still are valuable as a human being, and you're still worth saving. You're still worth loving, and you're still worth reconciliation with your family. And that is the major message that I want people to walk away with after they enjoy all the fighting and all the stuff. The reason why.
Okay, there we go.
That's okay. Yeah,
okay,
that's okay. I just, I'm just saying, like, I hope that people enjoy the action and all the fun parts of the movie, but I hope that more than anything, they walk away saying like, maybe I should give my mom a call, or maybe I should call my brother and check in on him. It's been a long time, and if people do that, if this movie causes someone to somehow reconcile with a loved one, man, like, have we done our job or what?
Yeah, I totally agree. So how long did shooting take? And aside from the taking the days off, was there any other difficulty stuff that you had to deal with?
Difficulty. Well, first of all, it took about somewhere between, I can't remember exactly, but it was somewhere between like 20 and 25 days to shoot the movie. Every single person who worked, other than Kevin, every other person who worked on the movie was cast and crew. So there was no job too large, no job too small. We did allow Kevin to just be an actor. we didn't make Kevin hold the boom pole or anything like that.
Yeah.
But everyone else did, and so 20 to 25 days. What was the most tough thing about it was two things. Number one is we're shooting in the middle of a pandemic. So we wanted to be conscious of that. We wanted to remain, safe and not do anything stupid and not, have any outbreaks and not get each other sick, anything like that. And we were as careful as we could possibly be. Nobody in the 7 to 10 people that were really the core members, none of them ever got COVID until after like they were out, done with the movie and in normal, regular life. And so I'm really proud of that. We were very careful and safe about that kind of stuff. And then the other thing was just making a movie with so few people. The fact that like this was my first movie where I was a cinematographer out of necessity. So I wrote it, I directed it.
You did everything. You were a jack of all trades in this one.
I was. I edited the movie, and sometimes out of necessity, and oftentimes out of necessity, and sometimes to the film's betterment, and sometimes to the film's detriment. I'm glad that I'm able to do all those things, but I'm certainly not a master of all of those things. And so it took everybody chipping in. Like we had a guy, Brock Lynch, who he plays, the scary guy with the mask who's running around and he's been on the library doors, like he can't get in. He's also he plays like 5 different bad guys in the movie that you wouldn't notice unless you like really knew. But he's like, he's in a hazmat suit. Okay, like for example, there's a scene where there's a guy in a hazmat suit looking up and down the halls with a shotgun. Yeah. And that's him. There's another scene where he's in the locker room with Suede and they're talking about, Suede's baseball scholarship. That's him. There's another scene where he's chasing him down the hall and he's banging on the library door. Same guy,
oh, wow.
Several different characters in the movie, and we just dressed him up differently. And while he's not playing, Yeah, while he's not playing half of the bad guys in the movie, he's over there rigging up, turning a pile of clothes into a dead body that can lay on the floor. And he owns a construction company. That's his day job. And we're using his giant generator to run lights up through the school that has no electricity. And, all it's just like there's no end to what all of these people were able to do and to make happen. And one person was bringing random costume pieces that made the movie better, while another person was picking up lunch. And it was just I cannot tell you how much of a collaborative effort it was. And in the midst of all of that hard work, here we are skipping up and down the hallways, singing 90s rock music and laughing and cutting up and having a good time, like I really haven't done in a long time on a movie set. So it was really special.
That's awesome. And I know there's going to be detractors out there. They're going to see this film and like, oh, why they make it doing this? And, it's going to be crap. I'm like, well, you know what? This is probably one of the most dedicated sets here. And now hearing this from you, this is probably one of the most dedicated film stories I've ever heard, because you had this minimal crew and you really made the most of it. And that's why I feel like this is a great film. This is a film that people need to check out because of that dedication that all you guys did. And I just feel like if it doesn't get much love, then that ain't right. That's all I'm going to say, because it deserves it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I know that Kevin's going to help bring in those crowds of people to check it out. And we really are proud of it. I've told people this before. I call it like I see it. I'm a very honest filmmaker. If I make the next Good Will Hunting, I'm telling people, man, we made the next Good Will Hunting. If I make the next great cheesy B movie 80s action movie, I tell people, and I think that's kind of what this is. This is a nostalgic 80s 90s type action thriller. It's got suspense, it's got cat and mouse, it's got crashes, explosions, fighting. I mean, when the fighting involves body slamming people, and roof tiles being knocked out, like just big sort of wrestling type moves. There's some jiu-jitsu in there. There's lots of forms of martial arts and just kind of street fighter, street combat kind of stuff in there. They're just fun to watch. And also the other thing is there are a lot of those really great 80s and 90s taglines. Like there's a line in the movie where the sister grabs a gun and she shoots a bad guy who's in the middle of a jiu-jitsu fight with her brother. They're rolling around on the floor and he's like, shoot her. And she finally pulls the trigger and she shoots the guy right to the back and he rolls over dead. And the brother looks up from the floor, breathing hard, and he's like, you killed him. And her line is, he started it. It's like stuff like that. It's like, that's so 80s. You know what I mean? It's such an 80s, 90s like tagline,
Yeah.
And the film is chock full of that stuff. And it's just, if you grew up watching 80s and 90s action movies, you're going to love them.
Then you definitely going to like this one. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So,
yeah. So finally, what's next for you after now that lockdown is going to be coming out February 1st? What's next for you after this?
Well, so I'm currently in production on a Western, and that one has a handful of great names. It's going to be Chad Michael Murray is our biggest name in the movie.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's been fantastic to work with. He's just with us for just a few days, but we were able to shoot a good chunk of the movie with him, and so he can really have some adequate screen time. But he's been phenomenal. We got a couple of kids in the movie that are working and booking a lot of stuff and hopefully becoming really recognizable, here pretty soon. And so it's been a blast. We've it's always fun to do a period piece. It's always challenging, but it's got to create a great sort of John Wick type of concept. Except it stars a female instead of a male, and it's set in the 1880s, which is rare for a female lead. And so the film looks beautiful. It's a much bigger crew than what we had in lockdown, probably 10 times the crew and probably 5 times the budget, and so that one we're going to finish up this year, and it will probably come out like late this year, next year, something like that. But that one's called Bad Men Must Bleed.
A female John Wick in the Old West. I kind of like that idea. I definitely would check. Yep. I definitely got to check that one out. I like that.
Cool. Here's how I pitch it. I say it's John Wick and the Old West, but starring a female. And
Yep.
it's like you automatically get it. You're either like that or you don't, you know?
Like I think people need to. We're getting more of these John Wick. I think John Wick's becoming like the new trend now, becoming an influence on certain films. Like there's there's one coming out next week called Clean with Adrian Brody, and that has like a John Wick style, like it's like a slow burn John Wick, but it looked pretty good from the trailer. So
cool, very cool. Yeah, it's such a high concept, and it's so simple. It's anything that you can explain through a single picture. You know, like here's like Lockdown. Like, you know, here's a DVD, right? These will be, by the way, these will be nationwide in Walmart on February 1st. And they'll be streaming with Redbox, and you can rent them at Target and Best Buy and Barnes and Noble and about 20 other streaming sites. But it's like you don't look at this cover and wonder what you're getting. You know what I mean? That very high concept, right?
That's it.
Yeah, no explanation necessary. And I think those kind of movies work really well. People like those movies, and if you can get a couple of decent sized stars in that kind of a high concept thing, I think you do well. You know, so that's the vision, that's the goal. So that's what we do.
That's awesome. So everyone, remember, Lockdown is coming out February 1st on DVD and digital from Uncorked Entertainment. You all need to check this out if you love, especially if you love 80s and 90s action films. You know, this may be set in the future, but come on, let's just face it. We're really not going to have that much high tech down the road right away. So definitely check it out. And Micah, you are the man. You are the jack of all trades. And I can't wait to see more of your work, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about the movie.
Oh, thank you, brother. God bless. I really appreciate you.
All right, man. You take care and stay safe.
You too, buddy. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.